he had, and you'd also say, he made it seem so simple. Like, how come I didn't get that? Because he was able to take the most complex area and distill it to a point which was like really crystal clear. And as you also know, and perhaps he's been characterized, also partially true, as he was a super genius in all areas, in secular philosophy, if you want to call it that, in the sciences and the like. But understand, everything that he did stemmed from Torah. In fact, someone told me, Rabbi Ginsburg was just here, he's speaking to Tova Lichtenstein, and she said that basically everything my father did started with Gemara. So we shouldn't think he was out there in other areas. He studied other areas. So everything started from Gemara and was Noveya, so to say, flowed from there. And as a result of that, he was able to deal with complex, modern issues. He was his advice was often sought at various Harvard University, other universities, because they respected him to be a true giant in all of those areas, and truly was able to make a Kiddush Hashem in all of those areas. I think he really brought to mind the idea when the Torah says, "Rak am chacham v'navan hagay hagadol hazeh," when the people look at the Jewish people and they see how insightful the Torah is. Like, wow, Jews are amazing. They're so smart. They're so knowledgeable in general, and they can apply the Torah to all aspects of life, which is really what the Rav was. He was really the walking Sefer Torah with application to all aspects of life. Another amazing aspect, and it's small compared to his learning, because learning so overpowered every part of the personality, was a tremendous chesed that he had. And a lot of times when you have a great person, you don't recognize the chesed and sensitivity that they had. And one would certainly assume someone who's such a great Talmid Chacham and was almost oblivious to his surroundings. I remember, seeing him at Yeshiva University across Amsterdam Avenue, be Talmidim with him, because he wouldn't see the cars whizzing by, because he's involved in learning, involved in thinking. So someone on that level who's Kulo Torah, you think, didn't see, what was happening, and yet there's so many cases that people later came and said, chesed situations. They were once walking in the streets of Brookline in Boston, and they were lost, and Rav said, "Okay, come with me, I'll show you where you're going." Or someone, he unfortunately had a talmid that wasn't well, and he would stop the shiur early because he didn't want to make it obvious that this young man had to go for medical treatment. So therefore, everyone got dismissed early that day without having to embarrass the talmid. So there are many, many things that he did, which, despite his tremendous godless in Torah, exhibited his tremendous sensitivity, which also flowed from his commitment to Torah and his knowledge of Torah. I just want to share one quick, small anecdote, and then I'm going to ask Rabbi Reifman to address us. Rabbi Reifman was a Talmud Mupok of the Rav. I remember being in the shiur one time, and it was a packed shiur. It was in my Maimonides school. It was a summer shiur, and his shiur there would last 3 to 4 hours. I was there in the latter years. The earlier shiur went 5 or 6 hours. So 3 to 4 hours. It was an exhausting shiur. And the next day we came in and we did chazor in the afternoon. It was really nice. We had a great summer in Brookline. After the shiur, we get a little ice cream, we ride our bicycles, and we chazor over the shiur and prepare for the next day shiur. It was a great life. And we walked into shiur the next day, and the Rav rarely gave Musar. But this time, he gave Musar. He says, whatever we said yesterday, it's all wrong. We have to discard it. He said, and he went on to show, we missed the premise. And his svara didn't account for every single detail, and we missed something, and because of that detail that we missed, we have to revamp everything. And they gave us Musar. And he said something like, do you know the difference between me and you? And, yeah, we do, you're a Gadol Hadar, we're just regular guys. He said, no. He says, when I leave the shiur, I work on the shiur. I chazor over the shiur in my mind. You guys may take a break, maybe have ice cream, play basketball, do whatever you do, but this is it. He was constantly involved in learning, and his asmara was unbelievable, and because of that, he was always willing to re-examine what he said. The intellectual honesty was unbelievable. It wasn't about, it's my shiur, it's about what's the truth of Torah. So a shiur to him was an expedition, if you will, to uncover the truth of Torah and to transmit it to the next generation. And in terms of that, he really left an amazing legacy, thousands and thousands of Talmidim, and they have been successful in transmitting the Torah for future generations. Many of the shiurim have been recorded. Some of them have actually been transmitted into writing. Just put some of the books, some of the svarim over here, both in Hebrew, both in English. Over there, I have here about 15, 20 svarim right off the bat. So he really left a tremendous mark. We're fortunate to have with us every Friday Rav Reichman Shlita, who was the right-hand man of the Rav. When I started this year, Rav Reichman was giving the Chazar Shiur. Back then, I'm sure he doesn't remember me, I was just a kid in the Shiur, but Rabbi Reichman was the one who was giving the Shiur for the Rav, who knew the Rav intimately and closely, and really was Kona his Torah, completely. And it's our great privilege to have Rav Reichman address us and share insights on his Rebbe Zatzal.
It's my honor to be here today, and I was actually looking upstairs at the graduating pictures of the graduating class, and I realized I started here in 2003. So Baruch Hashem, it's my 10th year. And I always had a very warm feeling about this yeshiva, particularly Rav Friedman and Wade, because it's mamish the fulfillment of the Rav's teachings. The Rav Zatzal, he felt that it was absolutely possible to combine the finest, highest, deepest learning of Torah with the highest, finest studying of secular studies, and to produce the Bnei Torah who are versed and comfortable in the secular fields as well. And a yeshiva like this is a yeshiva which Rav Friedman and his colleagues, your rebbes and other administrators have created. And after 10 years of being here and seeing intimately the kinds of bachrim that this yeshiva has, I can really say this is the Hagshama, this is the fulfillment of the Rav's dream. So Yashikov to you, and may all of you continue in this path. I wanted to give you a few very short ideas about the Rav, and to really understand that what you are doing, every single fellow here from the first year, 9th grade, up to and including 12th grade, is a complete expression of the Rav's fundamental philosophy. There's a very big difference. I don't know if every single fellow understands this, but Torah is a philosophy. It's a series of ideas that Hashem Yisborach, with the sages, has revealed to us. And then we take that chokhmah, that philosophy, and we turn it into maisa, into action. And sometimes people are doing things, they don't understand what that chokhmah, what the philosophy behind it is. And I want to give you a couple of very important philosophical ideas, which are perhaps maybe the most important ideas that I picked up from the Rav. And you can see how that's really affecting your education and your very lives. Now, first of all, I wanted to say a little short Dvar Torah. The Rav spoke once about a Rambam, that the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah, he quotes 2 psukim as a source for the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. One pasuk he quotes is Vishinantam Levonecha, which we say every day in Kriya Shema. And another pasuk, he quotes a pasuk V'hodatam Levonecha Levnei Vonecha Yom Yishamah V'Neshama Kacha B'chorei. First pasuk, teach your children Torah, and the other pasuk is teach your children and your grandchildren about the day we stood at the mountain and accepted the 10 Commandments at Sinai. And the Rav wanted to know why the Rambam quoted both psukim. Now, if you look at that second pasuk, there's a strange thing which strikes one, is that a grandchild is mentioned. In the first pasuk, Vishinantum Levonecha, teach your children the Torah. In the second pasuk, V'dam V'necha V'nei V'necha, tell your children and your grandchildren. That's a very interesting, striking point. And what he said is that you teach a child Torah and you can teach a student Torah. That's one thing. That's one mitzvah, obviously. But there's another thing here, teaching a grandchild Torah. When you teach a grandchild Torah, you're moving ahead 2 generations. And the idea is that Talmud Torah is not teacher-student, one generation to the next. It's many generations to the next. It's not just, I'm teaching you, the father's teaching you. It's the grandfather and the great-grandfather And it goes all the way back to Har Sinai. So that's why the Rambam has two aspects of the mitzvah. One is simple Talmud Torah. The other aspect of the mitzvah is what the Rav used to call the Mesorah of Torah. Mesorah meaning it's a tradition, or it's passed on for multiple generations. So you may be sitting in Lawrence, New York, and you are learning Torah, and you think, this is America, and I'm learning something here in the United States, and my Rebbe and me, this is it. It's not true. There's a Mesorah. You're learning Torah the way your great-great-great-great-grandfather learned Torah back wherever he came from, whether he comes from Baghdad, or Vilna, or Bulgaria. It's the same Torah, and it's built upon all that studying, and all that learning, and all that living, which went back and goes back thousands of years. We are not just today, we're thousands of years old. And our Torah is thousands of years. And this Torah can adjust and be learned in any possible situation. Whether you're in Russia, or Iraq, or US, or Israel, wherever you are, you're learning Torah because it has the ability to transcend time and place. And that's something to really think about. Because when I hear something that an older Talmud Chacham tells me, and he's a 70, 80-year-old man, I have to respect that, because that's really the Mesorah. But when my Rebbe says something, you know, this is what Rashi meant. This is what shot in the Rashi. It's a Mesorah. It's not just my Rebbe saying something. It's what Rashi said. And Rashi lived almost 1,000 years ago. And when Rashi said that, he was saying Pshat in Abaya and Rava, who lived 1,000 years before Rashi. And Abaya and Rava are teaching me when I hear the Rashi and when I hear my Rebbe. I'm learning this Torah from 2,000 years ago. And this Torah is teaching me how to live today. And the reason that the Jewish people is eternal is because our Torah is eternal. We don't have to worry about being in this country X, Y, or Z. Any country we're in, we have the philosophy which helps us survive as a nation and as a holy people and a special people. So the idea of Mesorah, that it's not just now, it was forever, and for me it's going to go on forever. I have to teach my child, and I have to make sure that my grandchild learns Torah. I can tell you, as a guy with a white beard, there's a tremendous pleasure to learn Torah with a grandchild. I wish you all the blessing that you all be zocheh to teach Torah to your grandchildren, and then the great-grandchildren. Now, I want to tell you another thing from the Rav, and that is that Talmud Torah is much more than a philosophy, and it's much more a chachma of how to live, and it's much more than intellectual excitement. It's kihem chayenu, v'orech yomenu. It's living. The Gemara says, Kol ha-neshama tal ka'aluka. You have to, every living thing should thank God for being alive. And we all should thank God for being healthy and being alive. But the Gemara makes a drash. Kol ha-neshama al kol neshima u-neshima. For every breath, for every single breath, I should thank Hashem for letting me breathe. And I recommend, besides the mitzvah of Bikkur Cholim, that everybody visit hospitals on a regular basis. Because then when you come out, when I come out, I realize, wow, every breath is a blessing. Every breath. And for the Rav, one breathed Torah. When you breathe, you're breathing Torah. That's the air. That's the neshama. That's the lifeline. I can tell you a couple of stories about that. You know, a lot of people, the Rav was probably, in a certain way, maybe the most famous rabbi in the world. Because not only was he known by all the Jews, or from Jews as being a tremendous gadol. But he was also known by secular Jews because of his great philosophy, and Goyim, and I remember Time magazine wrote a big article about him once, so that all the Americans knew about him, and the Christians, and the Catholics, and so he's maybe the most famous rabbi in the world. But if you wanted to get to know the Rav, you had to go to a shir, and you had to learn his Torah, because that's when he opened up. A lot of people, they wanted to have a connection with him, but they couldn't sit in the shir, and they didn't know what's going on in that shir. So, they would try to talk to, this I was a witness many times, people coming over, this person, that person, and trying to talk to the Rav about something else, not Torah, politics, who's running for president. Then some people try to talk, they don't know politics either, so talk sports. Boston Red Sox, because the Rav used to clip out articles about the Boston Red Sox so that he could talk to his grandchildren before he told them a pshat in the Rambam. He told them a pshat in the Boston Red Sox. So who's better, the Red Sox or the Yankees? And I tell you the truth, I would watch the Rav, he would answer these people. He would answer, but he had no enthusiasm. I mean, he would give the right teretz if you asked him, okay, who's hitting the most home runs in the American League? He would tell you because he had to know for his grandchild. But he said it with it. Eyes were half closed, and it was just like sort of like a tape recorder. But I would stand there, and I tell you the truth, I saw that underneath the surface, the Rav was really, it was bothering him. He didn't want to get involved in these things. So I would ask him a question on a Rambam. Wow, then he'd wake up, all of a sudden his two eyes pop wide open, all of a sudden he's grinning, all of a sudden he's sort of jumping and screaming and pshatim and the Rambam, Reb Chaim. That was his neshama. That was his neshima. That was his life. Now I'll tell you the truth, I'm a Rebbe here, but I'm also a Rebbe in YU. And I like to listen to boys. What do boys talk about when they're walking in the street? What do boys talk about when they're sitting over lunch at a cafeteria? And I can tell you one thing. I hear boys talk about many, many different things. But when I see a couple of boys talking Torah, the Rebbe said this, and I think shots like this, and there's a kasha like this, I say, wow, this is neshama, this is neshima, this is really living the Torah. And not just a subject, not a subject that I learn in class and get a certain grade. Chaz v'shalom, Torah kehem chayenu. This is mamash our life. This is our life. This is connecting me to Hashem. This is connecting me to God Himself. These ideas are so fantastic, so beautiful, so profound. I can't leave them. I have to talk about them. Now, I have something beautiful, I have to share it. So, talking Torah, outside shir, that's very, very important. And that was the Rav. His shurim, like Rabbi even said, were very long. Very long. And a lot of times during the shir, a boy would ask a question, and he loved that because it made him go another hour. One question, another hour, so it was good for him. But what was really very special was after shir. After shir, he was many times exhausted because, he liked to scream when he gave his shir. He liked to talk. I can't reach that level of intensity, but he was screaming at the top of his lungs many times. And at the end of the shir, he would be tired. He would be tired. I started the shir with him. He was around 60, 62, 63, and I was there for about 25, 23, 24 years. So when he ended, he was about 84, 85. So when he hit around 75, he would get really tired at the end of the shir. He'd sit there at the desk. It was really interesting to see. This was a really phenomenal thing. And that shir had, let's say, 80 boys listen to the shir. And at the end of the shir, so he's sitting at the desk, he's very tired. about 75 boys would go out. They want to go eat lunch, whatever, go to college. And 5 boys would sit around by the desk and start asking the Rav questions about this year. I was always in those 5 boys because I really loved talking to him, talking and learning. And then he would open up, more pshatim, more Rambams, more explanations, more insights. And you get to see that Torah is not just a shiur, it's not just a lecture. Torah is Gehem Chayim. We would walk, as Rabbi Friedman said, we walked him across the street. He would rest for about half an hour by the desk, and then we walk him across the street. Be like 5 or 6 fellas all around him to make sure that the cars wouldn't hit him because he didn't see the cars. He was talking and learning. We walk in the street, we're talking and learning. You can ask him this, ask him that. I remember once I walked in the street with him, and there was a fellow, one of my friends. He was a very good Talmud, and when he finished Smicha and YU, he went to Harvard University to get a PhD in Jewish studies with the Rav's son-in-law, Dr. Yitzchak Persky. Anyway, this fellow comes back for a shiur. And at the end of the shiur, we're walking across the street, and this guy, his name was Moshe. Anyway, Moshe starts talking to the Rav. He starts quoting this philosopher, that philosopher. And usually when we walk with the Rav back home, we talk only pure Torah, Rambams, Raivits, Gemara. And this guy, he's in Harvard, and he's in Jewish philosophy, so he starts to love Jewish philosophy. And this guy, that guy, the Rav answers him. Then, we be going across the street, we got to the building. The Rav turns to him and the Rav said, I want you to know, Moshe, he says, all the philosophers in the world, he said, I think I know a little bit about them. All the philosophers, from Plato till Kant and post-Kant, you put all of them on one side of a scale, and everything that they said, and you put one svara, one idea of the Rabbeinu Tam on the other side of the scale. And you want to know, this scale is going to measure the depth of the thinking. And I'm telling you, Moshe, I was amazed to hear this. He says, I'm telling you that one svara of the Rabbeinu Tam is going to be heavier than all the philosophers from Plato till Kant. Wow. I mean, he put that boy in his place. He said to him, I have respect. He was the first one who got that PhD in Jewish philosophy, the Rav, and he paved the way for everybody after him who's from to go to university. And he said, never confuse the wisdom of secular studies with the wisdom of Torah, the Torah Shebaal Peh. The Torah Shebaal Peh wisdom is much greater, much deeper. So once I heard that, I said, wow, this is a statement. This is a statement. No one else can make such a statement because he's the only one in the world who knew both sides so well. They say that when he got his PhD in university in philosophy, he knew philosophy so well that the professors didn't know what he was talking about. And he said that one svara of Rabbeinu Tam is more than all the philosophers put together. Now, when he was very old, and unfortunately in the last years of his life he had very bad Parkinson, and he was laid up in his house in Boston. And his memory had gone so badly that he didn't even recognize his daughter, who he had lived with for about 20 years since his wife died. And people would come up there to visit him, and he would be mumbling, and they would put their ear to his mouth and listen to what he's mumbling, and they would hear him saying, Rambam says this, and Reb Chaim says that, and he was saying it correctly. He was calling the Rambams correctly. That means that the Rambam, Reb Chaim, and the Torah was mamish his neshama. Because you lose everything else, but that core, that neshama, is still functioning in this world. And that core was Torah. It was called Neshima. He breathed Torah, literally. Now, I want to come up with another very important point in terms of the Rav's basic ideas. If you read, and Baruch Hashem, I was offered to learn with him a lot, and to hear a lot, and to read a lot of things that he wrote. If you read his things, you see that there's a certain, his philosophy, his Torah philosophy, his machshava, which Rabbi Friedman and his great Rebbe, Rabbi Chait, are very familiar with. You see certain principles that he keeps on coming back to. Now, one very, very important principle, I want to talk about that, is that he has this concept of gadlus ha'adam and shiflus ha'adam. Humanity, people are great. Mamish, great. We are people, men, women, boys, girls. We are God's final creation. So God 6 days, and he finally created the human being. We are the elite, the highest point of the universe. You don't have to go searching stars and planets. You're never going to find anything God created as special as people. That's Yesod A. Yesod B, second Yesod that the Rav always worked with is Shiflus Ha'adam, that the human being is a very, very low being. There's a paradox. As great as we are also very, very lowly. Okay? When you read about or see what happened in Boston at the marathon, when you read and see, when you go home today, you'll find out that the city of Boston is closed. No one's allowed out of their house because of 2 maniacs. One maniac was killed last night. One's still on the loose. And he could blow up a city building. He has so much dynamite strapped to his body. So they closed the whole city down. What's that say about people? Shiflus ha'adam, that a man can turn into worse than an animal, worse than a beast. He can get in a plane and blow up a building and kill 3,000 innocent people. That's worse than an animal. So at the same time, you have gadlus ha'adam. Man is amazing, great. Ma'at melokim, just below God. David says in Tehillim. Krisata ma'at melokim, just a little bit below an angel of God. And on the other hand, a person can be worse than the worst animal. Even a lion wouldn't do that. So, this paradox within people is a very big yesod. We should know, if we do Torah and mitzvahs, we can become amazingly like angels. And if God forbid, people fall into the trap of sinning, they can be the worst animals, as we see, as we ourselves are witness to. So this is a big yesod, godless and shiftless. And the Rav said that another part of this yesod is, I have to dream. I have to dream. Like I know all of you boys, all of you have a dream. One of you think you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a millionaire, a billionaire. Some of you think you might make the NBA, be a basketball star. Whatever your dreams are, good. You're supposed to dream for godless. But at the same time, the Rav says, you have to be ready to accept defeat. You have to accept defeat. Okay? No one is going to win every game. Okay? The Yankees will not win every game. They can win the pennant and lose 4 straight in the playoffs. You can be great, but you have to accept defeat. Because accepting defeat is part of being a human being. It's shiftless. Only God is never defeated. People are always defeated. And the greatness of a Jew is that a Jew knows how to be great in defeat. We were kicked out of a lot of countries. It didn't change us. We became greater because of that. Okay, so you dream, but you also accept defeat. And that's a tragedy. I think it's very important for the boys to know. If you fail a test, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. The only thing which counts is what do you do after you fail that test? If you throw in the towel and say, I give up, that's a tragedy. If you say, I'm going to continue to my best, then you're great. If you're in a certain field, you want to be a doctor, but you can't be a doctor because you failed test. And you have the courage to say, I will not be a doctor. I'm going to become a physician's assistant. That's what I can do. And I'll be the best physician's assistant I can be. I won't be the physician. That's greatness. You learn how to live and grow in your defeat. And one thing I want to say about this yeshiva, it's not a yeshiva, I've been there 10 years. I see that in this yeshiva, we accept defeat. We're not elitist. We're not saying only the best boys, only the boys who are 95 and above. Everybody counts. Every single person counts. Everybody has their contribution and their thing that they do. And that's exactly the Rav's philosophy. The Rav was not elitist. He was against elitism. He said, Gadlus Adam is Shiflus Adam. It's being humble and knowing your place. That's what makes you great. To do what you can do. Not what someone else is doing. What does God want you to do? That's, the Shiflus is your Gadlus. And I have to tell you, after being on this planet for almost 70 years, it's a tremendous lesson in life. It's a tremendous lesson. I have to learn that my shiftless is my godless. That I do what I can do, but I don't have to do what I cannot do. I have to do what God gives me the ability to do. I have to respond to my situation. I don't have to live someone else's situation. This is such a big yesod in Botai. I don't know if there's anything bigger than that. And what the Rav said was that when it comes to learning Torah, this duality of gadlus and shiflus is the yesod of hatzlacha in Torah. It's the yesod. You have to have shiflus. A person has to know, I don't know anything. And then the Yodea. And then the Yodea is important. 95% of Tosfos begins with Tzorech Iyun. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't know something. And then V'yesh Loma. Maybe you could say. V'yesh Loma. Some say. But Tzorech Iyun is the basis. You have to start off, a guy starts off, he knows it all. Wow, that guy is headed for a crash. Someone who knows it all. You have to be a shofel. Torah is for another. The Gemara says, Torah is mitzuya by people who are shval luach, who are another, who recognize that they don't know. If you don't know, it's great. Be honest, I don't know, it's great. You're already halfway there. Halfway to every solution, every answer is the right question. The right question. If you ask the right question, you have half the answer already. So many times they'll give shir, and he would ask the question, and they would give the answer. And the answer was the same thing as the question, but instead of a question mark, make it a period. And you sit there and say, wow, what happened? The question became the answer. And that's really true. Many times that's what it is. The question is the answer. Understand the question, and you know the answer. So, it's great that you say you don't know. That means you're going to become special. So, anivus, and then on the other side is gadlus. The Rav had amazing, and this is something which pervades all of his talmidim, who are rabbeim, and your rabbis, tremendous confidence in the ability of an average Jew, an average bacher, to learn at the highest possible level. We're not going to water it down, guys. We're not watering it down. You got to learn at the highest level. Not because
You can't because you can. You can. Even if you don't realize it, the Rav said you can. And the Rav's Rebbe said you can. And it goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu, who taught every single Jew, every mitzvah Hashem told them. And he gave the same shir, Rashi says, to Ahron. The first person he gave a shir, Torah Shebal Peh, was to Ahron HaKohen, the second greatest Talmud Chacham in the people, because he was a prophet. And then he gave 1, 2, 3, 4 shurim. And the fourth shir he gave to every single Jew. And he said the exact same shir that he gave to Ahron, he gave to the water carrier. And to the boys 13, 14 years old. That was Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And the Rav gave shir, could be giving shir to a guy like Rabbi Schechter, who's a gadol. Or Rabbi Ahron Lichtenstein, a gadol. And he gave that same shir to boys who came in the first day. They were 17, 18 years old. I remember I came into the shir, I was 17. And Rabbi Ahron Lichtenstein was sitting there, he was about 28 or 10 years old, and been in the shir 15 years. Started shir when he was 12. And Hershel Schechter was sitting in the shir, he was 21. He started shir when he was 13. These geniuses, they went into the Rav at 12 and 13. So, and I was there, and I didn't know what was going on, but anyway, after 3 or 4, but I like to raise my hand. Rebbe this, Rebbe that. So after 4 or 5 times, after Schechter comes over, he says, listen, you're new. Why don't you just listen? Don't ask him any questions. But the Rav never said anything to me. The Rav, after about 20 shurim into it, all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but like usual, he would get stuck. He's learning something that he was learning Mohammed Hashem Ramban. Got stuck. I can't figure it out. He's trying. This, nothing works. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking. Then all of a sudden, a light bulb goes on in my head. I think I know what it means. I raised my hand, I said, Rebbe, I think I'm a pshat. He said, okay, Reichman, what do you think? I said, this is what the Ramban means. It means there's a shibud chal and a shibud. I said, You're right! Reichman's right! And then he went ahead for another hour and a half explaining it. And I can tell you, boys, I'm 70. This happened when I was 17. So it's a good 50 years ago. I remember that like looking at you right now. It's so real. That made me understand that I have a potential. The Rav can believe in me. The Rav is saying I can do it. And as every boy, they make a difference. And I met one of the Gadol Ador in Eretz Yisrael, his name is Moshe Shapiro. He told me, I'm so jealous of the Rav because I know the Rav could teach every single person who sat in that room. And I can't. I can only teach Talmidei Chacham. But he had that. But I want to say, not just it was great pedagogue, he had the belief in every Jew, that every Jew can do it because of Gadlus of Adam, because a Jew is great. So my both side, Yeshiva believes in you. Yeshiva believes you can be great. Yeshiva believes that you can learn Torah at the deepest level. You can understand that Rabbeinu Tam that the Rav was talking about to Moshe. And you will be big Talmidei Chacham. And you will learn Torah with your children and with your grandchildren. And we'll be Zocher to have all the great Talmidei Chachamim. Who knows, maybe one day we'll come across someone who's like the Rav. I have yet to see it, but we hope we will see another Rav. And have a good Shabbos.